everyone. Yes, it is. Please be on your best behavior. All right. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Caitlin. I am here in Oxford, Mississippi. I work at Square Books. I'm the events coordinator. We are here this evening to talk about Elizabeth Gonzalez James' fantastic debut novel, Mona at Sea. She is joined by Galadrielle Allman. But before I pass it off to them, I want to talk about a few upcoming events that we have next week. So next week, we proudly present a 3-day virtual crime spree. We've got three mystery thriller crime authors all in a row. So first we have on Monday, July 19th at 5 p.m. Central Time on Zoom. Thriller queens Megan Miranda and Wendy Walker will discuss Megan's Such a Quiet Place. It's a twisty, locked box thriller about a mysterious murder in an idyllic and close-knit neighborhood that will keep you turning pages late into the night, or maybe you'll on the beach and get a sunburn because you just cannot put that book down. Tuesday on the 20th of July at 6 p.m. This is going to be on HarperCollins Crowdcast. We are proud to partner with HarperCollins to present Karen Slaughter in conversation with Alifair Burke in celebration of the publication of Karen's latest standalone novel, False Witness. HarperCollins is teasing some special author guests that are a surprise. I don't know who they are, but they're going to pop in too, so be sure to join us for that. That's 6 p.m. On next Tuesday. All right. Then finally, Wednesday on the 21st at 5:30 p.m. Central Time, back on our Zoom, we'll be hosting S.A. Cosby in conversation with our neighbor on the square, Ace Atkins, to discuss Cosby's Razorblade Tears. Razorblade Tears is a story of bloody retribution, heartfelt change, and maybe even redemption. I just got an email from essay, aka Sean's publicist, and it's going to debut on the indie bestseller list next week. So we are so proud of him. You can learn all about all three of these events and many more on our website, squarebooks.com/event. But enough about them. Let's move on to the main event. I would like to tell you a little bit more about our authors this evening. So before becoming a writer, Elizabeth Gonzalez James was a waitress, a pollster, an Avon lady, and an opera singer. Her short story, Cosmic Blues, was a finalist in Glimmer Train's Short Story Award for New Writers, and her stories and essays have received multiple Pushcart Prize and Best of the Net nominations. She's attended Breadloaf Writers Conference, the Tin House Writers Workshop, and Lit Camp. She lives with her family in Oakland, California, and you can find her on Twitter and Instagram at Unfemme James. That's Unefemme James. She is joined this evening in conversation with Galadrielle Allman, who was born in Macon, Georgia in 1969, the same place and time as her family's legendary band, the Allman Brothers Band. Her father, Dwayne Allman, is considered one of the greatest rock guitarists of all time. Galadrielle was raised primarily in Berkeley, California, where she still lives happily. She studied writing at Sarah Lawrence College, always hoping to tell her family's story. On the eve of her 40th birthday, she began to write her first book, Please Be With Me, A Song for My Father, Dwayne Allman, published by Spiegel and Grau in March 2014. She is currently working on a novel which continues to mine the subjects of family, identity, and music. All right, phew, two very accomplished ladies. So happy to have you both on our Zoom screen this evening, and so excited to hear about all things Mona. Thank you both so much for joining us. Those of y'all in the audience, if you have any questions for Elizabeth or Galadrielle, please submit them in the Q&A and I will come back to moderate those later on this evening. Thank you both so much and have fun.
Thank you. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hello.
I wanted to start by saying to everybody, just so everybody knows, that Elizabeth and I are good friends. We met in 2016 at a thing called Lit Camp. I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit about that, and we're currently in a writing group with other people working on novels, and it's been a great friendship and really helpful to me as a writer to not be alone in the process. So that's where we're coming from. And I was really impressed and surprised when Elizabeth told us that this book was coming out. This is was her first novel that she'd written, and you can tell us maybe a little bit about the process of coming to publish it, and maybe read us a little bit from it, and then we can talk about it more.
Yeah. Thank you, Galadrielle, and thank you everybody for having me, and thank you Square Books. This is so fun. Yeah, so I'll read a little bit of the book in just a minute, but yeah, I'll start off just by giving a really quick recap of how the book came to be published, because it was a very long ride. I started writing it in 2011, and it was partly based on my own experience of going through long-term unemployment in 2009. And I finished it in 2015. I sent it off to an agent. I got an agent, and she took the book on submission, and it went out to a bunch of editors in New York, and everybody loved it and nobody picked it up. And so I put it in a drawer and for a few years, and I started working on a second novel, and that's when I met Galadrielle. And I would send it out to small presses occasionally, not really expecting anything. In 2019, I sent it to a contest run by Santa Fe Writers Project. And to my complete shock, I was named a finalist in the contest, and they offered me a contract for publication. So it's been 10 years from first word to today when it's out in the world. And yeah, it's just been such an up and down process, and I'm just really thrilled to be here. So
I'll just never forget. I was actually, we were riding in a car up to another friend of ours in our writing group's house, our friend DB, to go on a sort of mini retreat together. And you just sort of casually told us all, like, I got a publishing contract for my first novel, and we almost crashed the car. We all turned around and went, wait a minute, what? We didn't even know you were still submitting it. I don't even know if we knew it existed. Maybe you'd mentioned it once before. And to me, it was just such a great story of your own determination, and as a writer, it's such a huge part of the job is staying kind of hopeful and optimistic. And that's such a huge theme in this book, about sort of your relationship to your own kind of negative inner life, that I just love the way that kind of story just shows, the process you went through with Mona is not unlike the process Mona herself goes through, and sort of getting herself on track and not giving up on something that she's always wanted to do. So
yeah, art does imitate life in weird ways, or life imitating art, or whatever.
it does.
Yeah. So I'm just going to read a short little section. This is, I think, from the 4th chapter of the book. So if anybody hasn't read the book, it's about a young woman named Mona Morales. She's a Latina millennial. It's set during the Great Recession, and it's a dark comedy about Mona's experience of long-term unemployment and her quest to basically figure out what she's going to do with the rest of her life. So in this scene, she's at a networking mixer for unemployed people. And I think that's all you need to know. I'm mingling again, listening to a woman tell me her idea for a new frozen yogurt parlor / belly dance studio, when I hear my name and turn around to see Paulette and Randy waving and smiling. These are people she knows from her job seekers support group. Paulette appears to have forgotten my outburst from the other morning because, as usual, she seems genuinely thrilled to see me. What a great turnout, she says. I nod and try to think of a way to apologize when Paulette is tapped on the shoulder and excuses herself. Randy's in good spirits. His tie has a picture of a grinning fish on it, "Kiss my bass," scrawled underneath. He's rocking back and forth on his feet and telling me a rousing tale about being bitten by a rattlesnake when I spy Paulette being chatted up by the French woman. And I can't explain whether it's out of guilt over how I've treated her or because I'm discovering that her desire for what's best for me is actually mutual. But when I see Paulette, her hair a Dorito-colored halo atop her sainted head, I know I have to save her from suffering financial ruin at the hands of this scheming Continental. I wonder if this makes me a hero. Oh, hell no, I say, excusing myself and pushing through the crowd. The woman is crouched over Paulette like a vulture, getting ready to tear open a carcass. As I approach, Paulette is asking if the woman accepts personal checks. She's not interested, I say, as Paulette sputters and looks confused. The French woman turns and glares. The whites of her eyes are yellowed. The muscles in her face are visible under taut gray skin, and I can imagine that, like a vulture, she spent her life surviving on scraps. You're very rude, the French woman says, and attempts to maneuver around me and continue her drug sale. It's a scam, I tell Paulette, physically blocking her from the French woman. It's a pyramid scheme. She's trying to take your money. No, Paulette says, but I can see my words sink in as she knits her brows. These are European. They're the fastest growing herbal supplements in France, and it's all women selling to women. I can take them to my church group. You are police? The French woman asks, poking a bony, bejeweled finger into my sternum. FDA? No? Then fuck off. Okay, Paulette says, smiling nervously and holding out her hands to separate us. We don't need to get heated. You're a leech, I say to the woman, pushing her finger aside, aware I'm raising my voice and attracting an audience. You prey on these people because they're desperate and they have no other options. And to sell diet pills, it's an unregulated industry. There could be crack cocaine and horse shit in there. Her face is venom. Her arms fold up against her black sweater and she shrivels before me. You're a bad person, I say. Danny is already heading for the door, no doubt trying to distance himself from his crazy sister. I take one last look at my captive audience and, deciding I've already burned the bridge, point to the sign above my head and add, "You misspelled hobnob," before I leave. That's Amore pipes into the parking lot, and I wish I'd had a chance to eat more before leaving. Danny is waiting under a streetlight, his arms crossed. Are you happy? He asks. You look like a psycho. Oh, well, I say, now everyone knows. The restaurant door opens and Randy and Paulette come out. Mona, Paulette shouts, though I'm only 10 feet away from her. She runs up and hugs me, and though her frizzy hair is smothering my face and making it hard for me to breathe, I allow the embrace to continue until she relinquishes her hold. That was such a sweet thing to do, she says, her hands still on my arms. Thank you so much for looking out for me. You were right. It was possibly a scam. Definitely a scam, I correct her. It was probably a scam, she concedes, but I wanted to let you know I appreciate the gesture. She pauses a moment before she says, you remind me of my daughter, very oppositional. I'm not sure how I'm supposed to respond, so I just mumble goodnight. I'm walking to the car when I hear Paulette call out, you're a good person. I wave goodbye and close the car door before the moment can get any more saccharine, before anyone can notice the blush I feel creeping up my cheeks. Fortunately, Danny rescues me by smirking and saying, you're my hero, Mona. And I look at my reflection in the car window and smile, just a little bit, just for me. Thank you.
That's fantastic. One of the things that I love the most about this novel, and I think it's really taught me something for my own writing, is all of the other characters other than Mona, and the way that they are so unique and have such interesting personalities and have this way of interacting with Mona that makes her grow and makes her change. Because this book, unlike your next book, which I've been working on with you for a long time and so impressed by, it isn't this huge epic plot, it's this emotional plot, right? And it has this ability to carry us close to this primary character of Mona and watch her develop as a person. But it's all of these other people who are just fabulous characters in their own rights that really move her through a change, you know. And I just love, like, her brother Danny, who is sort of this hapless kind of sage. He kind of ends up being this kind of agent of change, and you just underestimate him throughout because he's kind of a frat bro. And Paulette, who's just so kind. And it's really about, sort of, for me, it's about sort of showing the way that other people impact her. And I wonder what it was like to write all those different characters, and how you came up with the sort of web that they create around her to sort of support her.
Yeah, the best advice I got about supporting characters was from Matt Johnson, who I worked with at the Tin House Writers Workshop. And I'm going to get his metaphor wrong, but it was something like, if you imagine your theme is like a maypole, and then the characters and the situations are kind of the streamers that are wrapping around it. And he had this way of talking about characters, supporting characters, like they have to be the opposite of the hero, or they have to reflect some part of the hero back to themselves, or they have to be exactly like the hero in a way that makes the hero recognize their own flaws or their own problem that they're trying to deal with. And I got that advice after I had written this book, and I can't even say that I used that advice to work on this, because maybe I did in the revisions, but I just don't really remember. But the point is that, yeah, I think the best supporting characters are the characters that really push the main character to change, and that also bring out something in the main character that maybe wasn't apparent before to the reader or to the character themselves. Yeah, I don't know if that really answers your question, but that's how I think about supporting characters now, that they have to be a piece of the main character, or they have to be the total opposite, or exactly the same.
Yeah, I love that, because when you start with a premise of Mona, who is essentially kind of facing a moment of potential growth, but also she's in a really low point when we meet her, and she's very kind of she's turned in on herself, and she's kind of dealing with all these kind of real dark feelings, and she's dealing with coping mechanisms. She's cutting herself, she's drinking a lot, she's really turned inward, and it's sort of a dark place that starts to shift as other people kind of pull her out of herself, and she starts to sort of try, and the way that they see her and the way that they treat her kind of starts to change the way she sees herself. And it's so interesting, because I think that especially when writing about young people, it seems like it would be easy to just go into a really deep dive into their own sort of psychology and get stuck there, but you really pull her out into the world, and you create these kind of great absurd kind of situations where she's at different at a wedding, or at a mixer, or on a horrible date. You write this incredible description of her dancing in high heels. Like, there are all these moments that are kind of humbling, and she's kind of confronting herself, but she's also kind of forced to see other people's kind of vulnerability. I just think it's really beautifully done.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think, like, when I first started writing this book, I had never written anything before, and I really didn't know how to tell a story at all. I think I had to learn how to write a book by writing this book. And the first few drafts were her very much inside her head, just her alone. And I did that on purpose, because I wanted the verisimilitude of a person going through unemployment, which is a really solitary experience. It's literally just a person at their computer emailing out resumes, and it's awful. And it just isn't satisfying fiction. And nobody wants to read that, even if that is the truth of that experience. And yeah, so in order to make it a more satisfying story, I realized at some point a few years in that I had to take her out of her house. I had to put her around people. Like, the job seekers group was not in the first few drafts. That was added later. And I realized also that she does not feel super comfortable around her own family, but I wanted her to find a family eventually, as kind of ragtag as that family ends up being. It's not the people that she would have chosen to spend her early 20s with, but they they do coalesce, and they do, she finds cohesion and she finds camaraderie. And that was really important, I think, for her character as well, to find people to go through this experience with.
Right. And she even does sort of start to see her parents as people and her brother as people. I mean, almost every character that you create, including her mother's obnoxious little dog Pepper, they all have emotional arcs. They all grow in relation to Mona and in relation to each other. They become more vulnerable. You know, she sees her mother as a person when she starts to sort of hear the story of her parents' first meeting, and it's not the story she thought it was. It's just a sort of slow process of the characters kind of impacting each other in conversation. And I don't know if there's any, you know, way. I sort of think that humor is something that either writers know how to do or they don't. I've been trying to think of for the last couple of days, how am I going to ask Elizabeth about writing humor, because it's such a strength of yours, and it's so natural to you as a person and as a writer. But I wonder, you know, it's really such a strength of Mona's that kind of keeps the whole book buoyant. And as sort of heavy as some of the themes are, there's a way that she is constantly finding like the perfect metaphor or the perfect zinger, and she has this kind of levity in her that really kind of wins out. And I wonder what it's like to write that. Was that always a part of who she was as a character?
That was always a part of her voice. And it's not a very satisfying answer, because I can't say like, oh, I, wrote drafts of jokes and I tried to like find the funny kernel. And I just didn't. Like, it's something about the ear. I feel like comedy happens somehow in the ear. Like, just certain jokes have a rhythm. And I feel like if I was drafting through a scene and I wanted to make it funnier, I feel like for me, it happens at the rhythm level. I can hear in a sentence when it should be like da 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 da, and and then that's when I know the da da. That's where the punchline is. It's not, yeah, it's not helpful to other people, but this is just the kind of like musical thing going on in my head. And then other stuff, like at one point she's hooking up with somebody and she realizes she wants to stop hooking up with him, but she doesn't know how to get out of it. And so she starts humming the Star Spangled Banner. And that was just like, what is the stupidest thing I could have somebody do at this point that would be funny? And that was what I came up with.
And he joins her. That's my favorite part. That's kind of, and this is how you're brilliant. It's like, it's funny and ridiculous that she nervously starts humming the Star Spangled Banner, but instead of him kind of rearing back, which she's hoping for, he starts to hum too. And it's like, oh no, now they're both humming. And it's like, how did she think of this? I think that's one detail that I actually called a friend and said, you've got to read this book. I mean, there's so many moments like that that are just laugh out loud funny.
Well,
And
somebody pointed out the other day that character is a Republican, and they were asking me if that was why I did that. And I was like, no, that never occurred to me, but that's so funny.
that is really funny. Well, that's the thing though. Even characters that don't stay on the page for very long, like her boss, they're so vivid. You know, they have you can smell his cologne, and you can smell her perfume that smells like cotton candy. Like, there's so many embodied details, which I think is really the mark of strong writing, is that you're really in Mona's body with her, in her discomfort. And when that starts to lighten and she starts to change and she starts to sort of see a way to turn her creativity out of herself and toward the world, you know, sort of her senses change. She's seeing things differently. She's, you know, it's all kind of lightens up, and it's really lovely. And we get to sort of watch her re-engage with the world. And I just think it's, and you do that through senses, which I think is so powerful, you know.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that I did consciously try to write all five senses in. I remember reading somewhere that Saul Bellow really did that. And then I went out to the library and I immediately checked out one of his books and I tried to read it and I just couldn't connect with it at all. But I have heard that he's really good at writing all five senses. And maybe somebody in the chat can corroborate them if they've read any of his work. But Yeah, my favorite piece of writing advice is from Henry James, and he says, try to be a person upon whom nothing is lost. And I really take that to mean like move through the world and try to like taste and feel and smell and hear everything that's going on, and then put that into your writing, because it really is. It's a big game changer between somebody who's just kind of sitting in a room and the scene isn't going anywhere versus somebody whose thighs are sticking to the couch because it's unbearably hot and they can't get the Dorito taste out of their mouth, and the neighbor like won't turn off their loud wrestling, and you know, all of a sudden then you're in a body and you're in a scene.
That's right. And you managed to anchor all of the things that she notices about the world into sort of her feelings. So it's not just sort of piles of details where you just, you know, are moving through, because you're really good at capturing the sort of suburban landscape, the sort of strip malls and the, you know, the sticky table in the Mexican restaurant and all of these kind of details. But it's also, it's part, what she's seeing and noticing is part of her. You know, there's this beautiful sort of moment of change where she witnesses wildlife in this kind of unexpected place. I don't want to spoil it, but it's like she starts to see the beauty in the world too. And so it's like even that is in a process of transformation. Like for me, this whole book is about transformation, and I just think that that's a really lovely thing to achieve. And we get to know her through the kinds of things she notices. And something else that I really loved about her, which is a similar kind of skill, is taking, you know, she's a business major when the book starts, and she has this sort of language that I don't think I've ever read a character with that set of interests necessarily. And she starts to sort of use the language of sort of economic theory to apply it to sort of actual interhuman relationships. She's thinking about her parents and this idea of the sunk cost fallacy, you call it, which I had never heard about before, but it's like if you've already invested so much, you can't take yourself out of a situation. And I just love that. I love the way that the details, there weren't sort of extraneous details. It's building a sense of this person in a kind of deep way. And the fact that she thinks in terms of things like fractals as a metaphor, or, you know, economic theory as metaphors, it gives us a sense of really who she is as a person. And that's kind of another way of using details and ideas to sort of enrich a character. It's not just sort of set dressing, you know, and I loved that.
Yeah, well, she's a really analytical person, and so it made sense that she would think of things in terms of like a cost benefit analysis. And also that's just the world that she's been submerged in for the last 4 years of college. And I also have a business degree, and I loved studying economics. And I really enjoy kind of weird intersections between two subjects that you wouldn't necessarily think have any overlap, like um, um, Robert Schiller, sorry. Yeah, whatever. He wrote a book called Narrative Economics that came out, I want to say in 2019, and it was about how narrative drives economic movements as much as real tangible data like the GDP and etc. A story can run through a society and propel people's actions. And of course, this makes so much common sense, but writing that down in book form, he's the first person, I think, to my knowledge, who has made a case for this. And he backed it up with a lot of data because, of course, economists don't believe anything. What is the joke? An economist is somebody who takes real life and wants to see if it'll work in theory. And anyway, so I just love that kind of intersection, though, between thinking about narratives and thinking about the movement of economies. It's fascinating to me. And yeah, taking financial concepts and Mona trying to find corollaries in her own life, like the fractal thing. It's just a brief little blurb that she writes in her journal, but it's talking about how fractals are found in art and nature. They're found in price fluctuations of stocks. And then she takes that and wonders if you can analyze a relationship through fractals. Can one little incident between a couple represent the whole of the couple's existence? And yeah, I think that stuff is super cool when you can bring two worlds together that never usually will meet. And it just really made sense for this character, so I just ran with it.
Yeah, I loved that. I love the idea of fractals and whether, you know, you're actually in control of the path that you're taking or whether they're repeating patterns throughout. You know, it's kind of a beautiful metaphor. And I think that's really this book is such an interesting balance between sort of ideas and theoretical sort of constructs and really concrete reality. And I just think that that's what the best literature does. It sort of pulls you into a world of ideas, but it's also representing something so real that it's really moving to watch that unfold, her world kind of grow and change. And I just think it's really an accomplishment. And I think it's interesting on the level of craft to talk about, you know, what you needed in order to be able to do that, because I know that you started this book and then came back to it. Was it a really different book than you remembered? Did you bring something really new to it? Because you'd change over a 10-year period. That's a big personal growth time as well.
Yeah, the book needed a lot of work. I thought when I came back to it in 2019, I had just become a better writer. I'd become a better reader, a better thinker, and I'd had a lot of years to mature myself and grow and just become a better human being. And it was difficult to get back into it. I was really lucky. My publisher paired me with a fantastic editor. Her name is Nicole Catherine Schmidt, and she was 23. This was actually the first book that she ever edited. And I was a little apprehensive about working with somebody so young, but I immediately could see that I was in my late 30s by that point, and she helped me really know when I was hitting the right beats for a 23-year-old versus maybe I'm putting my maturity into her at a place where she hasn't earned that yet. And that was really, really helpful to see, because yeah, I started writing that book. I was in my 20s and late 20s, and I finished it in my late 30s. And that's so much growth happens in that decade. And going back to something that you said earlier about Mona coming to a place where she could view her parents as people, she could view other people as people. I mean, as kind of pathetic as that sounds, in my early 20s, I was so self-obsessed and so unable to get out of my own myopic world that, yeah, viewing my parents as people and all of that stuff, it definitely did not come easily to me. I had to learn that. And I think that I can't speak for other 23-year-olds, but I think, Mona's a very immature 23, and I think I was too. And I think that's part of her transformation in the book as well, is just learning how to be a better, more mature person. And I think that's also something that I put into it, coming to it kind of at such a older stage in my life.
Yeah. What a gift to have an editor who's the exact age of your character. And honestly, what a gift to put a book down and come back to it. I feel like in some ways, it's really hard to let go of a book when you're done with it. And the idea of being able to then bring your wisdom later, it happened at a sort of magical time to make it such a beautiful and really thoughtful and mature book that maybe it couldn't have been if it had come out right away.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. One of the things about the book not getting published when it went out on submission originally, I mean, I was devastated, of course, when that happened. And when I got that letter from my agent saying, like, I just can't send this out anymore, I'm so sorry. But yeah, exactly what you said. It wouldn't have been as good a book because I just wasn't as good of a writer. And then two, failing to get it published was something I'm really grateful for, because when you're writing a book, the worst thing that can happen is that you write it and then nobody wants to publish it. And that happened to me already. And I lived through it, and I wrote another book, and I forced myself to write short stories, and then I got those published. And you know, uh, being able to experience failure is just something that I'm really grateful for, because now I know that I can push past it, and the sun is still going to come up, and I'm still going to be able to work. And yeah.
Which is literally, I think, really what Mona is about. You know, it's about sort of persevering through a dark time, and by letting other people in, and by treating yourself with a different kind of kindness. I mean, that's really what I took from it, and that was so moving. And so when I finished my book, I made a conscious decision that if I was ever going to write another book, I wasn't going to do it the way I did, because I wrote really in isolation by myself. And I really relate to what you said about your teaching yourself to write a book while you're doing it. I really felt like I did that with my memoir about my family. And the book that I'm writing now, and writing in our group together and sharing with you, has been such a different process, having the support. And I wonder if you made that decision too. Did you tell yourself that the next book that you wrote, you weren't going to be alone doing it? Is that why you sought out things like Lit Camp, or was that sort of serendipitous that happened?
No, that was really serendipitous. I made the conscious decision that I was going to write. I pantsed Mona for the most part. And for non-writers, you've got plotters and pantsers, people who plot out everything, and people who fly by the seat of their pants. And I knew that I was going to plot out my second book. But no, in terms of writing it alone, I really hadn't thought about that. It was really just my good luck that I got into Lit Camp, and that Janice asked me to join that workshop group, and then that I met all of you guys. I was initially going to tell Janice no. I didn't think I was ready to join a workshop group because I hadn't even written a page of my second book yet. And I thought, well, I need to write the rough draft in complete isolation and not show it to anybody. And then once I have a rough draft or a second draft, then I can start workshopping it. And then I thought, oh, what the heck, just join it and see what happens, which is how I make a lot of my decisions. It just ends up being, just try it and see what happens. And so I joined, and it ended up being great. I think that the feedback on those early pages, those rough drafts, saved me some time by steering me out of things that were unproductive and towards things that were going to be better for the novel. And yeah. And now I'm not sure for book 3. Like, I don't know, like what process would I follow? I have no clue. I feel like every book demands a new process. Yeah.
And you're remarkable that way. You have the ability to both plot and write really psychologically kind of complex internal books, and also highly plotted kind of epic adventures. I mean, I don't think people are going to imagine how different your next book is from this book, which I think is just amazing, because I think you do both things really well. But it's true. I mean, people are often so curious, you know, in talking to other writers, and I've always been curious about talking to people about process, but process is really kind of, it changes depending on what you're working on. You know, some content is too emotional to share. I mean, I can't imagine you talking to someone about Mona in the early stages of it. It's such a sort of private pain that you're mining. But then, you know, your other book is so kind of, the whole arc of it is so massive that it seems like it almost helps to have people kind of tell you where it's hitting the moments, right? Sometimes just having other eyes on it is really helpful.
And the process changes according to what's going on in your life too. I mean, my process has been so upended for the last year and a half, and I'm not sure when I'm going to get back into what I had in 2019, you know, where my kids would go to school and I would work while they were at school, and I could kind of I just had a chunk of time. I had, 5 hours or whatever it was. I haven't had that in forever. So since, February of 2020. And, the moral of the story is just be kind and be reasonable to yourself.
Yes, which isn't easy. I mean, that sort of inner demons that I think Mona is really struggling with herself, right? She's talking to herself when we meet her in a way that's highly toxic, and she's trying to sort of silence that inner critic so that she can do creative work, so she can do any kind of work. And to me, that's the hardest part of writing. That's the thing that I struggle with the most, is not just sort of setting up a schedule and adhering to it, but sort of letting yourself be open to the possibility that it's going to get better. The first time you write a paragraph, it isn't going to be great. It isn't going to be what you want it to be. But when you sit down the next day, it'll look different and it'll start to change. And that's a really hopeful process to be in as a person, to sort of give yourself room to maneuver and not sort of expect things to come to slide off your pen perfectly in a moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like that critical inner voice, the older I get, the more I realize I think so many people grapple with that on a daily basis, and it's impossible, I think, for some people to overcome. And that was a difficult thing for me to overcome. It's difficult for my character Mona to overcome. And you just want to like hug everyone and just say, just stop being so mean to yourself. You are amazing. You're doing the best you can. But not everybody's going to get there, unfortunately. And that's a tragedy.
It's true. And I think that that's the beauty of finding community, even if it's just one other friend who's interested in what you're interested in, having other people in your life that are also aspiring to write. It's such a helpful thing to share those feelings of insecurities, because we all have them. And to hear somebody that is really talented struggle, and you just think, why is she getting in her own way that way? And then you realize, like, oh, I did that to myself this morning. Like it's been so helpful to me to know you and to watch you go through this process. Because I would never want you to feel doubt. I just think you're so strong and doing this with such a lot of grace, and I'm just I'm really happy for you. I'm really happy that this book is out in the world right now and that people get a chance to experience it. I think it has a really timely element, even though it's set in a slightly earlier moment. I think for it to come out at a moment where so many people are struggling with unemployment, so many people got uprooted from their daily routines and are challenged to be sort of alone with their thoughts. It's kind of a book about resilience in a way that I think a lot of people are going to find comfort in it. I think it's going to make a lot of people laugh. I just think it's fantastic. So
yeah, thank you. And when I was writing it, I could not foresee the US getting into another recession. And then as the years kind of went on, I was like, shoot, maybe this will come out into another recession. And I think technically we're not in a recession, although it's certainly for a lot of people in the US right now, life may as well be officially in a recession. Yeah, so it's I hope that some people find some reflection of their own experience in the pages, or at least find some levity along the way. But yeah, thank you for your kind words.
No, my pleasure. Do we have questions from people, or?
So I think that maybe, like myself, you asked all the questions that I had prepared. This has been such, which is good. This is such, and so many more that I never would have thought to. Though, audience, if you do have a question, now is the time. Though, but truly, you did both of you, such a wonderful job, kind of just really kind of mining all the different kind of just great questions. I'm sorry, but I apologize, I lost my thought. But this has been I was thinking about it while y'all were speaking, that this has been a really special kind of dynamic, because we've never had two writers who are kind of always in touch and in this intimate writers group, and that's just given this this discussion like a whole new dimension. And I think the other folks who are in your group are so lucky to have two such kind of thoughtful and I don't know, empathetic people to bounce ideas off of. And this book was such a pleasure to read. As a millennial, I felt seen and like almost too seen sometimes. And okay, we do have a question. This comes from Sarah. She agrees that it was a great interview and she'd love to know what you're working on next, Elizabeth. But I'd like to know what both of y'all are working on if you would care to share.
Yeah. My next book is, as Galadrielle mentioned, it's a total 180 from Mona. It's a magical realism Western that's based on my great-grandfather, who was a bandito. He was put into jail in Houston. He escaped. He was chased down by the Texas Rangers and shot in the face, but he lived, and they called him El Tragabalas, which means the bullet swallower. And so the book is loosely based on that legend. And I'm hoping to go on submission with it this fall. It just depends on if I can, how long my kids will sit in front of the TV during August so I can work on revisions. So fingers crossed.
Wow. That is quite the departure, but
yeah,
I'm equally excited to read it. What about you, Galadrielle?
It's such an exciting book. So yeah, my book is it's a kind of a coming of age story of a young girl who moves with her family, her brother and her mother, from suburban outside of Austin in Texas into the San Francisco Bay Area in the 80s. And she's kind of undergoing her adolescence and finding her sort of chosen family in the music scene, in the punk rock music scene in the Bay Area. So yeah, it's sort of a similar kind of tone to Mona, in that it's an exploration that's kind of psychological about sort of growing up. So a much younger age group, but that's kind of thing. But it's in flux.
I love that.
Oh.
Yeah,
so
Galadrielle's book is really beautiful. I'm so excited for her to finish it, and then it'll be out in the world.
Yes, no pressure, but yeah, we are all eager to read it, and I hope that you will both be in touch with the bookstore to tell us when they're out in the world, and maybe we can do this again in person. But yeah, this has been such a delight, and I don't know if you can see it because you've got this big poster, but like, look how beautiful the cover is.
So beautiful.
So fine. And this is an independent press sold by an indie bookstore. Can't get more like pure book nerd book, excuse me, book lover than that. They also have these charming book plates. Keep paddling. So if you haven't already gotten your copy, because we've sold quite a few already, I'd encourage you to all to please purchase it from Square Books. As you know, we cannot hold author events, virtual or otherwise, without your support. And I think you're really in for a treat if you pick this one up. I dropped the link a couple of times in there, but I'm going to do it one more time. But it looks like we're kind of getting on time-wise, so I think we should wrap it up. If y'all would like to say goodbye, there's still no elegant way to end a Zoom call. It's always awkward, but and sad because I hate to stop it.
Thanks for having us. It was such great fun.
Yes, thank you both.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it. And thank you, Galadrielle.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Good to see your face.
Good to see you.
Such a treat to kind of be a fly on the wall in y'all's friendship, and hope you'll both stay in touch and take care, and hope to talk soon.
Thank you.
Alrighty.
Bye.